In space, no one can hear you scream. But obviously down here on Earth, it's a different story. And in 1979, the shrieks of terrified moviegoers could be heard loud and clear in theaters across the world. All because of Ridley Scott's breakthrough sci-fi horror movie, Alien. The critical and financial success of this film would pretty much make its director a household name, as well as influence filmmaking and science fiction for decades to come. When a movie is as popular and significant as the original Alien, attempting to craft a sequel that replicates the magic often leads to horrible failure. But the 1986 follow-up to Alien, aptly titled Aliens, achieved the rare feat of being a faithful and worthy successor to the film that came before it, joining a small collection of other blockbuster sequels that are arguably just as good, if not better, than their predecessors. A direct continuation of the events that took place in Alien, Aliens once again stars Sigourney Weaver as Ellen Ripley, the lone human survivor of the deadly space encounter with the iconic xenomorph referenced in the movie's title. A young James Cameron took up the director's chair for the sequel, and while he weaves a familiar narrative for the second installment, its many fast-paced and action-heavy set pieces are a stark contrast to the slow, brooding build-up that characterized the original film. Aliens would go on to become a box office hit, and between its popularity, its elements of gunplay and battling xenomorphs, and the rejuvenated and budding video game market of the era, you'd think that Aliens tie-in games would be all over the place, flying off store shelves and landing straight into the living rooms of children everywhere. But, well, no, that wasn't the case, and only a handful of Aliens titles were around when the movie was still fresh off the film reels. Perhaps the most well-known games that are directly linked to the film are ones that came out quite some time after its debut, such as the fantastic 1990 Konami arcade beat-em-up and the infamously panned Gearbox and Sega title from 2013, Aliens Colonial Marines, which is series canon now, I guess. The Aliens games that did come out shortly after the film's release weren't found on home consoles nor at the arcades, but were instead all developed for popular home computers at the time. Electric Dream Software published the European exclusive Aliens the computer game for the Amstrad CPC in 1987, which would be ported to several other PC platforms in the region, including the Commodore 64 and the MSX. American publisher Activision developed their own title based on the movie in the previous year, also named Aliens the computer game, which would be renamed Aliens US when it hit European shores to set itself apart. The last of these PC titles would only ever see a release in Japan, however, a run-and-gun shooter developed and published by a company whose name is practically synonymous with the role-playing genre, Square's Alien 2 for the MSX computer system. While the official Aliens movie logo is displayed prominently on the box art, the official title of this game is indeed the somewhat boring Alien 2, since that was the name the movie went by in Japan, but we'll just refer to it as Aliens from here on out. Published in 1987, shortly before the debut of Square's flagship series Final Fantasy, Aliens on the MSX is one of the company's very first projects. Developed in a time before the 16-bit era when it became an RPG powerhouse and enjoyed great financial success and critical acclaim with nearly every release. But prior to being saved by Hironobu Sakaguchi and the Four Warriors of Light, the company was in pretty bad shape and struggling to stay afloat in a competitive games industry, experimenting with a variety of different video game genres in the hopes that something would click with consumers. Producing a game based on the wildly popular Aliens movie must have seemed like a surefire money-making bet to the higher-ups at Square, so they made a deal with Activision to sublicense the IP in Japan, a practice that was pretty common at the time. So in case you noticed it earlier and were wondering, that's why you see Activision credits on the package materials and in the game. The backstory of the Alien franchise as well as the plot for Aliens are briefly detailed in the instruction manual, which I won't go into in any further detail, because if you haven't watched Aliens, I'd suggest you stop watching this video and correct that right now. It's one of the best movies you'll ever see. Anyway, the entirety of this game is a loose reinterpretation of the film's climax taking place on the exomoon LV-426, where Ripley must bravely rush in alone and save her surrogate daughter Newt from the alien hive, located in an unstable atmosphere processing station that's just minutes away from being blown apart by a thermonuclear blast. The player takes control of the heroine as she fights her way through the horrific hordes of creatures who will stop short of nothing to turn her and Newt into living incubators for babies so ugly only a 14-foot alien mother could love them. Using a gamepad is the preferred method to play the game, but since this is an MSX title, the keyboard is also a control option. A clunkier control option. Ripley's movement is controlled by the D-pad or the arrow keys, with left and right used to make her walk and up to make her leap into the air with a rather floaty jump. The player has some control over each jump's direction and duration, and can change Ripley's orientation mid-air once per jump. Pressing down makes Ripley crouch, and hitting left or right while crouching will execute a roll maneuver. At the top of the game screen is the heads-up display, with the current number of lives, game score, and life bar displayed on the left, the current weapon and grenade in the player's hands in addition to ammo counts on the right, and in the middle a radar marks the location of hostiles seen and unseen, similar to the tracker in the film. There are a total of 5 stages in Aliens for the MSX, with level 1 starting off just outside the entrance of the atmosphere processing plant. After taking just a few steps forward, you'll encounter the game's first of many enemies, an alien facehugger hatching from its ovomorph egg. The A button or spacebar will shoot Ripley's gun, making short and easy work of the pint-sized menace. There's no aiming up or down and all shots travel straight forward, however you can shoot while jumping. Other normal enemies in the game are the fast-moving snake-like chestburster aliens, erroneously labeled chestbusters in the manual, and of course the creatures most commonly associated with the Alien franchise, the xenomorphs, referred to as Big Chaps, an homage to the nickname fans gave the iconic drone alien from the original movie. They mostly just dash toward Ripley somewhat mindlessly on the ground, but they may also pounce forward, or crawl on and drop down from ceilings. In addition to the Big Chap, several other alien warrior types appear in the game, and all of the names assigned to them in the instruction manual are so wonderfully cheesy that they would have fit in nicely with the Kenner line of Aliens action figures from the 1990s. There's the Shadow Alien, who emerges from dark backgrounds to strike out at the heroine. The Sharkhead, who springs up from bodies of water with little warning, often laying in wait between platforms. Kinghead aliens, enormous xenomorph faces that suddenly pop out of walls and ceilings. And finally, the Wall Masters, who are exclusive to the final stage and don't seem to have truly mastered any walls at all, as they're fused to background surfaces, completely stuck in place. They may have corny names, but these foes are all dangerous, and like their silver screen counterparts, blasting through them results in a discharge of acidic blood that harms Ripley on contact, so it's best to try and keep some distance before striking a killing blow. The facehugger is the most common adversary you'll encounter, and that's actually a good thing, because destroying the empty eggs they hatch from is the only way to discover the power-up items necessary to progress through the game. The contents of eggs are predetermined and fixed for each playthrough, and if one holds a power-up, it can be picked up by crouching down in front of it. Blocks marked with a red cross will completely restore the life meter, and those with a wing icon increase the height and distance of Ripley's jump, stackable up to 3 times. There are weapon power-ups for Ripley's gun and her sub-weapon that upgrade what's currently in possession or replenish ammo if maximum levels have been achieved. Most of the artillery in the game is directly based on the tech found in the movie, with the default gun being the shotgun Corporal Hicks keeps handy for close encounters. Unfortunately, this so-called shotgun doesn't resemble its real-life counterpart, and only shoots 1 bullet per trigger pull and doesn't pack much power. Ammo is unlimited, however, and you only need 1 shot to take out facehuggers. Picking up the first weapon power-up ditches the shotgun in favor of the twin pulse rifle, which is loaded with 100 rounds that are shot 2 at a time. The next firearm, the smart gun, also shoots 2 projectiles simultaneously, but in a wave-like motion with slight homing capability, and ammo capacity is doubled to 200. The third upgrade equips the player with the servo machine gun, a rapid-firing weapon with a 250 bullet magazine, and after that is the fire gun, which holds 50 rounds that unleash a powerful blast of flame that can decimate multiple enemies at a time. The last gun to be obtained is naturally the most powerful and useful weapon in the game, the wave laser. This gun has enough charge for 50 shots and produces highly concentrated and powerful beams of light that travel right through their targets in a motion true to the weapon's namesake. Initially, Ripley has no sub-weapon, but an early pickup into the first stage will add 20 M40 grenades to her arsenal. These can be lobbed forward with the B button or the graph key, exploding when they hit any surface or enemy. Sub-weapons can be tossed while moving on the ground, but cannot be used while jumping. While the M40 grenades are quite destructive and are even able to kill the mighty xenomorphs in just 1 blast, they can be upgraded once and replaced by smart bombs, which create an exploding pillar of flames that move upward. Very useful for clearing out enemies hanging on ceilings. As you noticed, each sub-weapon and upgraded gun has a limited ammo count, and those who are too trigger or throw happy will have a particularly difficult time saving loot. Running out of stock sets you back to the default shotgun, and bombs are gone for good until another power-up is found, so conservation of ammo plays a big part of the gameplay in Aliens for the MSX. Other items hidden in the ovomorph eggs include one that resembles the atom symbol, which eliminates all enemies from the screen, a helmet that grants invincibility for a short time, a B-block that adds 20,000 points to the player's score, and a mystery item that might refill gun or grenade ammo, replenish the life bar, or add 1 to the player's stock of lives. The first stage in Aliens is easy and straightforward, allowing the player to become familiar with the game mechanics. Unlike the set piece from the movie the game is based on, there is no strict time limit and any of the 5 levels can be completed at the player's leisure. At the end of stage 1 is an airlock door that leads to the entrance of the atmosphere processing plant, and by simply standing still in front of it for a couple of seconds, Ripley can enter. It's here where you'll engage with the first boss in the game, and surprisingly, it's the Alien Queen. That was quick. This video game rendition of the Xenomorph matriarch is quite impressive, recreating the look of the movie monster in great detail and occupying a large area of the screen. Her attack pattern is simple, pacing back and forth and occasionally hopping and chomping at Ripley with her deadly in her maw. Survival is achieved by sticking to the left and continuously jumping and aiming your shots at the Queen's head, lobbing grenades at her when she closes in. You won't have to worry about running out of ammo for guns or grenades because they're unlimited during boss fights, so shoot and chuck away and she'll explode into a blue shower of harmful acidic blood in no time. In typical video game fashion, this encounter with the Queen isn't the last and is actually just the first of 4 battles with her, each playing out in pretty much the same way with the exception of increased life bars. Level 2 begins with Ripley dropping down into the facility, and getting to the end of this area is a bit more complicated than the last. Not just because it's populated by more dangerous enemies and trickier platforming, but because it's also less linear than the previous level. There are doors scattered throughout which take you to a variety of different destinations, and you'll have to know exactly which ones to enter if you want to make it past this stage, requiring trial and error and memorization. A second duel with the Queen concludes the level, and then it's on to the underground sewer portion of the plant in level 3. There are even more airlocks to go through in this stage, and it resembles a maze due to the sheer number of paths you can go down. If you're not careful or just unlucky, you may end up going through a door that leads straight to your doom. The final stretch of the murky depths requires Ripley to wade through waist-high waters and face the hordes of xenomorphs they hide. Reaching the final door here is the only time Aliens gives the player any kind of break, since there's no fight with the Queen and it's straight to stage 4. One step closer to the alien hive, one step closer to saving Newt. This area focuses less on exploration and more on pure action, forcing Ripley to survive the relentless onslaught of the alien horde before making it to the final level. Here you'll finally come face to face with the colonists of LV-426, or at least what remains of them. Defeating the Queen for a 3rd time will send you to the heart of the alien hive. As expected, it is the most complicated and difficult stage in the entire game, equal parts challenging action and tricky exploration. Reaching the somewhat hidden entrance to the Queen's final lair and ensuring the bitch is dead once and for all, Ripley reunites with Newt after the long journey, embracing her tightly, an end to the nightmare. You're treated to a simple text ending after this, which is all in English with some choice typos. The last screen displays your final score and ends by leaving things on a cliffhanger. There is a whole planet of them waiting. And by them, I doubt the developers had space prisoners in mind, which is what we got with Alien 3. Overall, Aliens for the MSX is a short experience and a complete playthrough for skilled players probably won't last more than 20 minutes. But don't expect to see the games ending on your 1st, 2nd, 3rd, or maybe even 10th attempt. This is a pretty difficult game that not only requires quick reflexes and strict memorization of each stage, but also a little bit of luck. I've played my fair share of original MSX titles, and few have impressed me more on a technical level than Aliens. For the time period and platform it was developed on, it's quite the achievement, with sound programming, solid gameplay, and eye-catching graphics. The game boasts a fine soundtrack as well, with background music that really adds to the mood, though it is a little odd that the first level's upbeat theme sounds like it would be more of a fit in an early Final Fantasy game than anything from the Alien universe. But well, there's actually a pretty good reason for that. Although this is a Square game, it was made long before their titles started having credit sequences that resemble phone books, and only a small team worked on Aliens. The short list of staff credits are printed on the back of the instruction manual, with some using strange nicknames and pseudonyms, a common practice for game developers in the era. You have people like Sellotape Tanaka producing, Kentaro Hayabusa composing the music, and graphics done by Dirty Tokita. Cool? Not exactly names that would ring any bells in the heads of gamers or longtime Squaresoft fans on the surface, but if you peer past the veneer of these silly handles, you'll discover that 3 of the most important figures responsible for some of the company's biggest hits worked on this MSX title before they became equivalent to legends in the gaming world. There was no direct involvement by the father of Final Fantasy himself, Hironobu Sakaguchi, but some whom you might consider uncles of the famed series were a part of this project. The identity of Dirty Tokita is perhaps the easiest to guess as is. Takashi Tokita, who's had major roles in many Squaresoft games over the years, including scenario writer and director of Parasite Eve, co-director of Chrono Trigger, and perhaps his greatest contribution of them all, lead designer of Final Fantasy IV. In the third volume of John Szczepaniak's eye-opening Untold History of Japanese Game Developers series of books, there's an interview with Tokita where he reveals that doing the artwork for Aliens on the MSX was actually his first job over at Square. His sprite work in the game really showcased his talents, as he captured the look and feel of H.R. Giger and James Cameron's iconic design so well that Square kept him on board to work on graphics and sound for several of their titles until he landed the big job with Final Fantasy IV. In that interview, he name-dropped some of the other people who worked on Aliens with him, and as it turns out, Sellotape Tanaka was Hiromichi Tanaka, one of Square's most prominent staff members who would go on to head up game design for Final Fantasy II and III, produce The Secret of Mana, Xenogears, and Final Fantasy XI, and take on director's duties for Seiken Densetsu 3. That's one hell of a resume as is, but he's worked on much more if you can believe it. The man behind all the audible pleasure in Aliens, Kentaro Hayabusa, is none other than one of the gaming industry's most popular and esteemed composers, Nobuo Uematsu, a man who has been described as the John Williams of video game music, and if you've been into gaming for any number of years, he really should need no introduction, least of all from me. Tokita also mentioned working on art for several Aliens ports for Japanese PC platforms, as well as the Nintendo Famicom Disk System. Unfortunately, these were all cancelled, and while the FDS version was nearly complete, a contractor outside of the original MSX development team was in charge of programming, and unfortunately the quality of his work did not seem to meet the company's expectations, so they scrapped the project. The game was not completely lost to time, however, and in 2011 someone generously dumped a ROM of the unfinished but playable game data online. This prototype has many similarities to the MSX game as you'd expect, but it also sets itself apart with some fascinating differences. I'll leave the talk of this ROM in the capable hands of my buddy Rewind Mike, who's here to tell you all about this Famicom Disk version of Aliens. Enjoy!
Over at Square, they were trying to build a bigger and better game. Unlike Aliens on MSX, this Famicom Disk System port never grew from its embryo form. The coding was anything but finished. Someone was touching assholes to elbows when recreating the game, so it was ultimately cancelled. The only thing Square wanted to do was jettison this into space. By a freak random chance, a prototype for the Famicom Disk System was recovered and leaked to the internet. Pure blind luck, 1 in 1,000 chance. So here we have the first cancelled game in the Alien franchise. It's about as close to a finished product as we'll get. Now, a ton of the game is very similar, but there are enough differences. So, let's take a look inside and see if it's worth reporting on. Enemies appear on screen from thin air, which consists mainly of facehuggers and chest bursters. The Famicom is able to handle these sprites properly, so the game doesn't look quite as jarring as the MSX. Speaking of, enemy hitboxes are pretty tight, and there can only be so many bullets on screen a la Mega Man, so not only is it annoying to dispatch the leaping xenomorphs, each will spew acid upon death. Thankfully, controls are super responsive, as we'll be battling in close quarters, so gameplay boils down to player ability to check for targets and react. All of the same weapons are here, and your aim isn't locked down to only a forward direction this time. The weapon system functions like Contra. You see a gun and grab it. No need to power up through different tiers. To top it off, Ripley has an infinite supply of munitions. On the downside, not all guns can be found on each stage, so babysit your favorite or risk losing it. In addition to an improved weapon system, they implemented health upgrades, armor to reduce damage, and even boots to make her jump higher. It really has all the bells and whistles to create a smash hit in 1987. Unfortunately, since we're working with an unfinished code here, there is a ton of jankiness to embrace. Lightly tapping jump and shoot at the same time while moving forward will cause Ripley to duck and shoot, but it doesn't stop you from moving. While I didn't use this much, it can be useful in the early game. Inside, we'll see the same door maze gimmick and overall stage design, which is fine, really. Since this game is unfinished, it has this janky ass double jump. Basically, you have to press up and hold jump at the same time right next to a ledge. Easy, right? Nope, it only works when it wants to. If anything, this will hinder a new player from enjoying the game. To further deter onlookers, a game over is just that. No continues. You go back to stage 1 and trek through the abandoned facility, which shouldn't be a problem. but jank. Stage 4 takes you into the facility's lower level. The pipes and walkways are melted by acid, and you can see the aliens have made it their home. Facehuggers seeking a host scratch their way from each crevasse in the stage. Even the color palette consists of dark hues to deliver that foreboding atmosphere. The area is filled with tricky long jumps that force the player to do a little bit of what I like to call ledging, which is trying to jump on the ledge and avoid getting spewed on before you can kill the thing. Best to avoid dying here and take the high road. I would personally start over if you lose all of your power-ups. Stage 5 is right in the alien hive. The scenery no longer resembles that of a man-made structure. Darker alien breeds now spew acid as far as possible upon death, and things really stack up against the player with a non-stop rush of facehuggers and chest bursters that spring at you relentlessly. Don't be caught here without armor, or it's game over, man. A fight with the Queen Alien caps off 4 of the 5 stages. The game likes to choose when damage can and can't be done to the boss, so it ends up feeling like a roll of the dice, even though you can clearly see I'm raining down on the Queen with bullets, and I still don't know where the hitbox is. I did notice that the fire gun makes old Queenie a pushover. Just stick with that for the whole game, jump in the face and spam it. I do, however, respect the fact that the game fills up your health every time you reach a boss fight. After killing the final queen, we get a little cutscene with Ripley and Newt running into each other's arms, finally reuniting heads to shoulders. If it hasn't been apparent during my segment, art and audio were the only assets completed, so yes, it's rough around the edges. I think another week or two and they would have had a version ready to ship. Honestly, the more I played through Aliens, the more I enjoyed it. On the surface, there doesn't appear to be much going on. The underlying challenge and enemy pattern memorization made this a fun title, much like a normal run in Contra, just not as balls to the wall.
Thanks so much for that fantastic look at the Famicom Disk version of Aliens, Mike. Now back to the MSX original. In short, it's a technically impressive game with an interesting development story, worked on by people who would become some of Square's greatest employees. But it's not without its flaws. And no, I'm not talking about Ripley's color palette choice making her look like she forgot her clothes on the dropship. Ooh la la. There are more damning issues that are beyond skin deep, mostly having to do with the overall game design, which creates an artificial and at times unfair level of difficulty. As alluded to earlier, progressing through the game requires a large amount of trial and error as well as strict memorization. Having to remember the layout of stages and placement of items and enemies is quite common in games, and usually isn't unreasonable, but many of the larger problems in Aliens arise with the proverbial wild goose chase that airlocks can lead you on. Sometimes you get sent back to the start of a stage, which can be annoying enough, but other times going through a door will send you to the previous level, or as shown earlier, straight to your death. The player starts out with 3 lives and has an infinite amount of continues, but there are no checkpoints, so you'll have to start over from the beginning of the current stage every time you die. That shouldn't be such a big deal, but all weapon and jump power-ups are also taken away, so you'll have to build up your character completely from scratch with each life lost. On later stages, a boosted jump and leveled up weapons are absolutely necessary to progress, so sometimes you'll have to purposely seek out doors that send you to previous areas or stages and repeat the process until adequately powered up to carry on. The boss fights with the Alien Queen look impressive, but her patterns are basic and winning a fight can depend more on luck than skill. For the last encounter, you'll essentially need a wave laser and be close to full health to even stand a chance at survival, because lesser weapons are either too weak or have firing rates too slow to be effective, and you'll need to endure quite a bit of pain as you slowly chip away at her lengthy life bar. I may or may not have had to resort to using an emulator to capture video of the game's ending, and if you have a problem with that, you can get burped. While the company and people behind this title moved on to do bigger, better things, and it's a mostly forgotten relic of the late 80s gaming scene, Aliens for the MSX is still an immensely intriguing oddity not only in the Square gaming catalog, but also in the annals of video game history. While it is plagued by some unfortunate design choices that hold it back from being a classic, I'm still extremely glad to have played this, and more importantly, given it a home in my humble collection of MSX titles. Unsurprisingly, and not unlike a majority of the MSX library, it can be a little hard to find and a bit on the expensive side of complete with box, outer cover, and manual. But if you're a fan of the Alien franchise, an MSX enthusiast, or a hardcore Square-Enix maniac, I wholeheartedly recommend picking this game up. It's just too interesting not to if you tick any of those boxes. Well, that's another episode of Import Gaming for the Win, come and gone. Before it's over though, another big thanks to Rewind Mike for helping out with his segment on the Lost Famicom Disk Aliens game. He has an excellent channel that covers both modern and retro video games, and sometimes even Japan exclusives, so I hope you check it out and follow him if you haven't already. He's definitely one of my favorites. Anyway, until next time, this is Jimmy Hapa. Game over, man! Game over! Take care.